Like we were saying, the SRP remains the same across all genres. The only thing that changes are the thinking job. And so we're going to use the same steps that we normally use for SRP, identifying the genre, identifying the thinking job, previewing the text, reading and annotating, and jotting down the main idea. And so now we are going to read a poem, and we are going to use the steps in practicing for main idea in poetry. So the text that we're going to be reading today, or the poem we will be reading today, is by Tupac Shakur. I know that a lot of us are familiar with who Tupac Shakur is, but if you are not, he is a little bit of bio on who he is. He was an African-American rapper, actor, and activist, and he continues to be a major influence in um, music, I believe. I believe that there are a lot of actors, a lot of poets, a lot of rappers in the industry who see him or consider him as an inspiration in the work that they do. And the poem that we will be reading today is called The Rose That Grew from Concrete. It is a really interesting poem, and I want you guys, as we're reading this, to think about the fact that we have been talking about adversity or reading about adversity and overcoming adversity. And so we're going to try and see how this poem connects to our unique theme on adversity or overcoming adversity. So to get to the deeper meaning of poetry, there are three things that we want to do. We want to find figurative language in the poem that we're reading. We want to think about the actual meaning of the words, and that's the literal meaning. And then we also want to think about the intended meaning or the deeper meaning of the figurative language. And that means that apart from the SRP that we are using, while we are on step number 5 or step number 4, when we're trying to figure out what the main idea is, we are reading our poem trying to figure out what are the figurative languages that we're using in the poem, because poem or poetry always uses a form of figurative language, maybe metaphor, simile, personification, hyperbole. There are a lot of figurative languages that you can use in poetry. There's tone, there's mood, and those terms we are going to learn a bit more about as we move into the new year. But for the purpose of the poem that we're reading today, we are going to focus on only 4 of them. And you're going to see the 4 that we'll be looking at in a little bit. And so these are the 3 things that you should be asking yourself as you are trying to get to the deeper meaning of poetry. You're asking yourself, do these words or phrases make sense to me when you're trying to find your figurative language? And then you're asking yourself, what does this actually mean? So the literal meaning of any phrase or sentence that you come across in a poem. Does the actual meaning make sense? And then we are going to find the intended meaning or the deeper meaning of the phrase that we come across. And we're going to see that in the poem that we're going to be reading today. So the four figurative language that I want us to review for today is imagery, metaphor, simile, and personification. For the purpose of the poem that we're reading today, we will be focusing on only one. We'll be focusing on number 4, personification, because when we read the poem, we are going to be seeing a lot of human qualities being given to a non-human object. All right. So the first thing that I want to do when I get my poem is I want to number my lines. So I kind of already numbered my lines, but I'm going to go ahead and keep numbering. So I have number 1, I'm going to do 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, and move this a little bit over here. And this is number 8. So I know that this is one stanza, a poem that has 8 lines. Okay, now I'm going to start reading. I'm going to read this poem 2 times. The first time I read this poem, I'm just reading to get the literal meaning, or to get the gist of what the poem is about, to know what's going on in my poem. So, my first read. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law wrong. It learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else cared. So I'm thinking, this has to do with, it's talking about a rose that grew from concrete and did some things like learning how to walk without feet, learning to breathe fresh air, even when no one cares. So my literal meaning of this is it's about a rose that grew from concrete, and that's why I put a little picture here, because in my mind I'm getting that picture of a rose growing from concrete. All right, and that's my first read to get a general understanding of what my poem is about. And so the second time I'm going to read this poem, I'm trying to get to the deeper meaning of the poem. And so I'm trying to see if there are any figurative languages on here. And I'm going to read again. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law wrong, it learns to walk without having feet. Hmm, is that a figurative language? And this is me thinking to myself. It's saying a rose grew from a crack in the concrete, and it's proving nature's law wrong by learning to walk without feet. But it's a rose. How can it be walking without feet? How can it be walking without having feet? So I'm thinking this might be a figurative language. But what kind of figurative language is this? If I go back to my figurative language, I'm going to try and see which one of this, whether it is a metaphor, a simile, or a personification. So metaphor and simile are kind of the same. They're both comparing two things, or giving, they're both comparing two things. But with metaphor, you're not using as or like. Simile, you're using as or like. And then when I look at personification, it says that personification gives human qualities to something that is non-human. And so thinking back to the rose that grew from concrete, a rose is a plant. It's not really a human, but then it says that it learned to walk without feet. So, a rose cannot walk. It's not a human. So I'm thinking this author here is trying to give the rose human qualities of walking. And so this is a personification. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this figurative language. I'm going to highlight in what color do I? I'm going to highlight with orange. So I have my first figurative language. I'm going to keep reading to see if there are any more figurative languages in this poem. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learns to breathe fresh air. Another one, it learns to breathe fresh air. It's a plant. Humans normally breathe. We see humans breathing in and out, but not necessarily a rose. So again, this is another personification, and I'm going to also highlight that in orange. And by the way, if I go back to line 5, it says, by keeping its dreams. A rose doesn't dream, and so how can it keep its dreams? Again, this is another personification. So I'm seeing that there are a lot of personifications on here. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one ever cared. So I see a lot of personification in this poem. So now for my third read, I figured out my figurative languages on here, and a lot of it is personification. So to get to my main idea. So I know that my literal meaning, let me look for a box. I'm gonna place it right here. My thinking job is I want to know my LM, or my literal meaning, and I also want to know my deeper meaning. So for my literal meaning, this is, I'm going to say, My LM is the same as literal meaning. A rose grew from concrete. That's it. That's what my literal means. It literally is talking about a rose growing from a concrete. And then for my deeper meaning, I want to think about this rose and all the figurative languages I've come across, the qualities that the author in this poem has been talking about a rose. And I'm also looking at this picture and thinking for a plant to grow, right? For a plant to grow, it has to have the right environment. And a plant doesn't usually survive when it's in a concrete. It needs a very different type of soil and manure to grow. But this rose is growing from a concrete. So it's not in the right environment where it can thrive or where it can survive. But despite it being in that concrete, it is surviving, it is growing. And then in this poem, it's saying that it is keeping its dream, it's learning to walk without having feet. That is some really, I don't know, really surprising thing for someone to do, or for a rose to do, or for someone to do. And it's saying it's learning how to breathe despite no one caring. And so I'm thinking, because I know that though it says it's a rose, I know it's not really talking about a rose. When we're talking about the deeper meaning, this might be referring to a person. And I know that our unit has been talking a lot about surviving adversity. So I'm thinking that this rose is being this rose may be a person, or is being compared to a person who has been surviving against all odds, who has been surviving when no one cares. And so this rose might be a person who learns to walk, and learning to walk without feet might mean that this person had to overcome a lot of struggle, a lot of adversity. And so for my deeper meaning, I'm going to go ahead and put the M. I'm going to say person surviving despite all odds. Or we can also say overcoming adversity how do you spell adversity in spite of all obstacles. In spite of all obstacles. And this will be my deeper meaning. And that's it. I have my literal meaning and I have my deeper meaning. And like we said before, the literal meaning is literally what is happening in the poem. And for a deeper meaning, we have to dig a little bit deeper. For a deeper meaning, you have to try and find figurative languages that will help you understand what the poem is truly referring to. And so for our thinking job, again, you have your literal meaning and your deeper meaning for poetry. Your job now is to go in and read the poem again and do your exit ticket. Your exit ticket will be posted, or it has been posted on the Google Classroom. Your exit ticket is due by 5. Please, if you have any question, do not hesitate to reach out to myself or Ms. B with any question that you have. I will be available tomorrow between 12 and 1. So if you have any question, you can reach out to me. All right. And I hope that you guys enjoy this poem. All right. Have a lovely afternoon, and I will see you guys tomorrow for synchronous lesson. Bye, guys.